Oh man, these kits sound so much better than the stock sounds, I am buying them. Okay, that might be an exaggeration, but if you've bought custom Roland kits from my store over at thedrumworkshop.com or from any other vendor selling sound downloads, and you've found that they don't live up to the demo videos, I'm going to help you work out why that is and fix it. Now, I'll get to the most common problem in a moment, but first, I just want to address how we listen to demo videos, and I don't mean that to sound condescending, there are just a few variables that need to be taken into account. So the main thing that I always recommend is to listen to the demo videos using the same headphones, monitors, or speakers that you use when you play your kit. Of course, the great thing about YouTube is that you can listen to it almost anywhere. Your computer, your phone, your TV. But all of those speakers could be very different to whatever you use on your kit. So to get the most accurate picture of how they'll sound from your module, try to keep the listening environment the same. If you sometimes use headphones and sometimes use an amp or PA system with your kit, try feeding the demo video through all of them before coming to a decision, if you're able to. I always record my demos directly out of the module using either the master outputs, which mirror the headphone outputs, or the USB connection, and there can be subtle differences due to the amp that powers the headphones. That can colour the sound a little bit, and also the method of recording might have a small effect. The only post-processing that I do is a very small amount of transparent limiting, and this is to control the peaks of the audio more for matching the volume of other videos on YouTube than anything else. YouTube will also compress the video, which can affect the sound, but I always try to cross-reference, and honestly, I can't hear any major differences between the kits on my module and the demo videos. Right, so solutions. If you are using the same headphones or monitors for the demo video and your kit, and they still don't sound anything alike, the most common reason is that the trigger settings on your module aren't optimized for your personal playing style. This is especially the case if the kits have acoustic samples added to them. So for a bit of background, when I create kits, I add my samples to each zone as a sub-instrument layer. For the main instrument layer, I use one of Roland's internal sounds, and I effectively make it match the sample as closely as possible. Some instruments won't be using additional samples at all, but often they'll still have a second internal instrument layered on them. The sub-instruments are usually set to fade the second layer in as you move up in dynamics. This is great for playability, but if your trigger settings prevent you from hitting the top of your dynamic range, you might not hear that full sound when you hit the pads. In my demo videos, if you see me hitting full strength hits, I'm probably near the top of the dynamic range. If you don't hit this range, the instruments might sound less full than the demos. Fortunately, a simple trigger setting tweak can ensure that you're hitting the top range for each pad when it's appropriate. So first, open the trigger settings on your module. On the TD-17, go to Setup, Pad Settings, Basic. On the TD-27, go to System, Trigger, Param. On the TD-50 or TD-50X, go to Trigger, Sends. Start hitting the pad that you want to adjust with your hardest musical hit. And what I mean by this is the hardest that you're likely to play in a natural musical setting, not necessarily the hardest that you can physically hit the pad. As you do this, have a look at the graph to the side. Every hit will show as a bar on this graph, and there'll also be a number given to it. This is the velocity of the hit. When using analog trigger pads, ones that connect with jack cables, the velocity ranges from the softest hit of 1 up to the hardest hit of 127. If you're using a digital pad on the TD-27 or 50 or 50X, the pads with the USB connector, this can go up to a top velocity of 127 plus 32. It's a weird range, I know, but that's how Roland chose to display it. If your hardest musical hits never reach 127 or 127 plus 32, I recommend increasing the sensitivity as you hit the pad until you reach it comfortably. You can really hear the difference there, right? So once you've done this, you can go around each pad and get those set up for your style too. The sensitivity value that you end up on could be completely different to mine, and it could also vary a lot between different pads on your kit. That's totally okay. It's all about getting it right for how you hit the pads, and each pad or trigger can vary internally. If you prefer, you can make it so that you easily hit the top range, or you can back off the sensitivity a little bit so that you've got to work harder to hit the top. It's completely up to you, and that's the beauty of electronic drums. But the important thing is to make sure that it is possible for you to hit that level. If you've increased the sensitivity and it's fixed the issue, but you're now finding that the dynamics aren't responding the way that you want them to from quiet to loud, you can adjust the curve setting to compensate. This is a topic to tackle in a different video, but if you want to know what each velocity curve does, go over to Roland's website and download the data list manual for your module. This manual contains a more detailed breakdown of most settings than the standard owner's manual, and it's a great resource for all of the trigger settings. Now, if you've got your settings right where you want them, but the kits still sound very different to the demo video, the next thing to check is that any samples included with the kits have installed correctly. This will only apply to kits that have samples. The effects of loading issues can range from having no additional samples assigned to the pad, so you only hear the inbuilt instrument, to the wrong samples being played back when you hit the pad. The general process for verifying this is by going to the user sample menu. On a TD-17 module, just hit the user sample button, or on a TD-27, TD-50 or 50X, go to user sample and then select the list or sample list option. The first bunch of samples will probably be the stock or factory samples that came installed on your module. These differ from module to module, and I'll link a document below that explains which samples are in each module. After this, you'll see the samples that you've loaded yourself or that have been added by loading kits. For any of the kits on my store, my typical naming convention looks like this. EDW identifies that it's a sample from the eDrum workshop. The next section is usually the name of the kit the sample belongs to. Then the final section is the pad or zone that the sample is for. Some kits might just have a snare sample, so it might just say H or R. Some will have K for kick, SNH for snare, etc. If you do see samples for the kit that you've installed, next you can verify that they're assigned to the correct pad. So for example here I can see that ZEP-AH and ZEP-AR, which are head and rim snare samples for the Zeppelin's A kit, are listed. So I'll go to the instrument. On the TD-17, press Assign, hit the snare pad, then press Sub to go to the sub instrument layer, and the sample should be assigned here. Hit the head and rim and you should see the sample swap with the zone. On the TD-27, press Kit Edit, go to Instrument, then press Sub-Inst to go to the sub-instrument layer, and the sample should be assigned here. Hit the head and rim and you should see the sample swap with the zone. On the TD-50 or 50X, press Instrument, then page down multiple times to get to the sub-instrument layer, and you should see the sample assigned here. Hit the head and rim and you should see the sample swap with the zone. If you don't see any samples that match the kits you've installed, or some appear to be missing or assigned in the wrong place, that's the first sign that they could have loaded incorrectly. This could be because the user sample space was full when you attempted to load the kit, or it ran out during the loading process, or it could be that the with user sample box was unchecked when loading the kit. Whichever of these it might be, I have a full video guide right here that explains how to remove any unnecessary samples so that you can free up space to properly load or reload those kits. It also shows you how to use the module backup feature so that you'll never run out of sample space again. Go check that video out and I'll see you there. Cheers!